Okay. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I hope everyone had a nice evening yesterday, and I see our colleagues still coming to the room, but we have to start. I remind you that the permanent coffee counter is at your disposal in the side of the room, where you keep following the conference from the screens. Welcome to this fourth session and last policy session of the Inter-Parliamentary Conference on Priorities of the Common Foreign and Security Policy and Common Security and Defense Policy. For this session, I am delighted to welcome Ambassador Delphine Pronk, Chair of the Political and Security Committee, who is here on behalf of the High Representative and Commission Vice President Joseph Borrell. Before giving Ms. Pronk the floor, allow me to say a few words of introduction. 30 years ago, in 1993, member states committed themselves to a common foreign and security policy. Much progress has been achieved since then. The Lisbon Treaty that entered into force in 2009 provided the European Union with a new institutional structure for its external service. Major efforts have been made to implement the new institutional setup ever since. For example, the EU acquired legal personality. The post of Vice President of the Commission, High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, was created. He or she ensures the overall political coordination and the unity, consistency, and effectiveness of the Union external action. The European External Action Service was operationalized. The EU delegations around the world have boosted the EU presence and increased diplomatic and policy outreach. Within this framework, the role of parliaments, European and national, is crucial. The European Parliament's role in the EU external action has gradually evolved from a marginal role to that of a substantial player, combining legislative, budgetary, and scrutiny powers with multiple forms of engagement with countries and societies from outside the European Union. Through this IPC and other opportunities for dialogue, we very much invite national parliaments to take their legitimate role as a key players, providing the democratic legitimacy to the EU action in CFSP. Also, a parliamentary diplomacy has evolved very much in the past few years. This is another toolbox in the hands of parliaments. While it can always be improved, the question is less how to make it effective than rather how to strengthen the synergy between executive and parliamentary diplomacy to achieve better outcomes. To address today's challenges, more EU action on the global scene is needed. Looking forward, we believe that the coming years should be used to strengthen the interinstitutional framework and enhance the strategic cooperation between all institutions and with national parliaments on CFSP and CSDP. Now, without further ado, let me hand the floor to Ambassador Pronk for maximum 15 minutes. Madam Ambassador, you have the floor.
Madam Chair, thank you very much. Good morning, distinguished audience, all diplomatic protocol observed. First and foremost, I would like to read out a personal message from the High Representative that goes as follows. Honorable members, distinguished participants, I thank very much the Belgian Parliament for organizing this conference in close coordination with the European Parliament. In these challenging times, when the international system continues to face multiple and overlapping challenges, we need regular dialogue between the European Union institutions and the national parliaments if we want to maximize our collective impact. Our citizens are at the center of all our actions. We therefore need your support to explain to the European citizens, as their direct representatives, what the EU foreign policy is about and why it matters. Your support is vital, especially this year as we are approaching the European elections. My absence from Bruges is due to an unforeseen change in the Commission college meeting date. The President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, has asked all members of the College to be present on the 5th of March in view of the adoption of some important Commission proposals. I would like to reassure you of my deepest regret for missing this valuable exchange. Ambassador Delphine Pronk, Chair of the Political and Security Committee and Deputy Political Director of the European External Action Service, will deliver the keynote speech on my behalf. I remain, of course, fully committed to continue and deepen our dialogue towards shaping the EU into a stronger geopolitical actor, and I wish you a very successful event. With my highest appreciation, was signed the High Representative Vice President of the European Commission, Josep Borrell. And on behalf of my boss, the High Representative Vice President, I would like to also add my words of thanks to the Belgian Parliament for organizing this conference together in close coordination with the distinguished members of the European Parliament. And this regular dialogue between our EU institutions and national parliaments is really needed to maximize the collective impact. In particular, it is important, like the High Representative also wanted to convey his message, to know for the citizens of the European Union what EU foreign policy is about and why it matters. Only a week ago, the European Parliament plenary session debated the annual reports on the implementation of the CFSP and CSDP, and I'm very grateful for the rapporteurs, Mr. McAllister and Mr. Mixer, for their lead role, as it is another important contribution between the EU, toward the EU becoming a stronger geopolitical actor. Our debate today is about the priorities of our CFSP and CSDP, and I know you already had quite intense debates yesterday, so the priorities that I will present to you will hopefully also lead to a fruitful exchange after I've delivered the key messages on behalf of the High Representative. 2023 was a particularly challenging year with multiple and overlapping challenges to the international system, with 2 wars on our doorstep, the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine and the war that has flared up once again in the Middle East. We face multiple, multifaceted challenges, be it on climate change, be it on food security, be it on energy. All these crises threaten global peace and security. They hamper global governance and they slow down sustainable development. We also see a surge of dictatorships across the world. That is a sad reality, unfortunately. And human rights defenders keep running their fight for a better world, taking huge risks. Allow me in this particular circumstances, very particular circumstances, together with you, to pay tribute to the late Alexei Navalny. Throughout his life, he demonstrated incredible courage and determination through his anti-corruption work across Russia, spreading the message that inspired many, especially young people. And he represented the possibility of a different Russia. To preserve his heritage, the High Representative decided to rename the global human rights sanctions regime after Alexei Navalny. On Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, we stand and we continue to stand in full solidarity with Ukraine and the Ukrainian people, and we will continue to support Ukraine for as long as it takes. In Ukraine and through Ukraine, the EU security and its future is at stake. Ukraine is at the front line between democracy and authoritarian rule, between the world governed by law and one where powerful countries impose their will on others. So far, the EU and its member states have mobilized roughly 28 billion euros of military assistance. But we need to do much more to supply Ukraine with ammunition and military support, and we need to do it now. We launched the largest military mission in EU history to train the Ukraine armed forces. By the end of this summer 2024, we will have been able to train over 60,000 Ukrainian soldiers on EU soil. And going further, we adopted legal acts concerning the extraordinary revenues held by private entities stemming directly from Russian immobilized assets. We continue to work to redirect those revenues to support Ukraine. We also continue to impose a high cost on Russia through sanctions and through international isolation. We have adopted 13 sanctions packages so far. And crimes and atrocities committed in Ukraine are of historical proportions compared only to those of World War II. They cannot go unpunished. The EU supports Ukraine in international efforts to ensure accountability for war crimes and other most serious crimes, including the crime of aggression, also through our civilian mission, UAM Ukraine. The HRVP Borrell, he raised himself our support to Ukraine at the G20 ministerial meeting in Rio just last week. While Russia's Foreign Minister Lavrov repeated his usual narrative full of lies and misinterpretations, nearly all the representatives of what I like to call the global majority reiterated their support to the core principles of the UN Charter, with territorial integrity and the non-use of force at its heart. And the High Representative concluded, and I'm quoting here his words, "I was impressed by how much Russia was isolated in that context." I will now go on to the next chapter of this speech on the war in Gaza and the situation in the Middle East. And I know you had a heated debate amongst yourselves yesterday. Over last month, Gaza has been another hotspot on the world map. Around 30,000 people were killed and more than 1 million are displaced in Rafah. And after 5 months of war and destruction, our focus must be on achieving agreement for the immediate end to fighting, to alleviate humanitarian catastrophe, to save the lives and free the remaining hostages still held by Hamas in Gaza. 26 of our member states share this call, and the HRVP Borrell again reiterated this recently in the context of the G20 ministerial meeting in Rio. In unison with most of the international community, we have urged Israel not to advance on Rafah. It would have humanitarian consequences of incredible proportions. Over 1 million Palestinians that have been displaced there and have nowhere else to go. Under these circumstances, the work of the United Nations, including UNRWA, remains crucial. We're taking Israel's allegation against UNRWA staff very seriously. And still, we must recognize that UNRWA is essential for stability in the region: Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, and the West Bank. In line with EU values and while working constructively with UNRWA to reinforce their internal controls, it remains crucially important to provide UNRWA with adequate funding. A funding gap would have catastrophic consequences, and the EU has decided to add another 50 million euros to UNRWA just recently, the decision by the Commission on the 1st of March that was taken. Beyond the humanitarian urgency in Gaza, there's only one viable solution to stabilize the Middle East: the two-state solution, which the international community has supported for decades. And via our special representative Sven Koopmans, we are working with partners towards that aim. We need to redouble our efforts to finally implement it, and we're already working to advance this path. On security and defense, Madam Chair, I would like to highlight that 2 years ago we launched the Strategic Compass. You had also a good debate, I know, with my good friends General Brieger and Admiral Hoffman yesterday. And back then, 2 years ago, the High Representative made the worrying prediction that Europe is in danger. And at that time, nobody paid much attention. Now it has become obvious to everybody. Everybody's talking about defense and defense industries nowadays. We are not going to be able to play a geopolitical role if we're not able to defend ourselves. A stronger EU defense with member states spending more and better together will also help to strengthen NATO. We are important partners. Defense is a national competence, and it's the member states that have armies, but we must be able to mobilize our armies to face common threats. We have to make them work better together in order to have more interoperability, more mobility, more capacity together, and more coordination. But spending more, unfortunately, does not always mean spending better. To get the best results, we need economies of skills. To ramp up production, the European defense industry needs certainties of long-term demand. And this week, the joint communication on the European Defence Industrial Strategy will be launched and presented by the High Representative and the Commission. We need capacity to act in crisis situations with partners where possible, but alone if needed. By 2025, we will have a rapid deployment capacity allowing us to quickly deploy up to 5,000 troops in response to crisis situations. And as part of this work, we concluded last October the very first EU live military exercise in Cadiz, in Spain. In this more and more volatile world, our CSDP missions are increasingly important to protect European security interests abroad and to contribute to global and regional stability. We are already working closely together in the context of our CSDP missions, and since the beginning of this legislature, the EU has launched 7 civilian and military missions, making up a total now of 22 civilian and military missions and operations. And the latest addition is our new military defensive operation, Aspides, meaning shields in ancient Greek, to protect and to accompany ships, merchant vessels in the Red Sea, and to raise situational awareness further to the indiscriminate Houthi attacks. Our neighborhood and beyond, I know you had a debate on EU enlargement, but I would like to reiterate that enlargement is a geostrategic investment in peace, security, stability, and prosperity of our continent. It must remain central to our geopolitical approach, and our commitment is action-based. December 2023 has set a landmark moment for Ukraine and Moldova after the European Council decided to open accession negotiations. Both countries have consistently shown their European conviction despite the war of aggression and Russia's destabilizing actions. The EU leaders also decided to grant Georgia the status of candidate country. They restated that they will open accession negotiations with Bosnia and Herzegovina once the necessary degree of compliance with the membership criteria is achieved. The European Council also reiterated its commitment to the European future of the 6 Western Balkan partners. And at the same time, we work towards the normalization of the relationship between Serbia and Kosovo within the EU-facilitated dialogue, and we will continue to do that. Beyond enlargement, we also significantly enhanced our security and defense cooperation with Moldova, Georgia, and Armenia. And the tensions in the South Caucasus have added only another layer of difficulty to our engagement with the region, and our strong commitment to the Armenian-Azerbaijani normalization process remains unchanged. In our southern border, we need to show the same unity of purpose in our relations with Africa as we do with Ukraine. And we remain involved in the Sahel. We have key interests in this region. That is very obvious, to support universal values, to contribute to security and countering terrorism, to tackle irregular migration, and to contribute to economic development. There's one global player that affects virtually each and every partnership the EU has in this world, from the Indo-Pacific to Latin America, and that is China. We must recalibrate our approach to China and purpose a de-risking strategy to avoid over-dependency, which can become critical vulnerabilities. And the EU-China summit on the 7th of December 2023 provided an opportunity for frank exchanges. China will continue to be a partner, a competitor, and a systemic rival, and our values and political systems differ fundamentally. The EU also consistently raises its concerns on human rights. China's position on Russia's war against Ukraine continues to affect EU-China relations, and the EU reiterated that it expects China to use its influence on Russia to stop this war and refrain from any direct or indirect military support to Russia. To secure a more balanced relation with China, we are intensively working on a more developed Indo-Pacific strategy. And on the 2nd of February 2024, the High Representative chaired the 3rd EU Indo-Pacific Ministerial Forum in Brussels, and that's an important milestone for the enhancement of strategic cooperation with our Indo-Pacific partners. Finally, a word on Latin America. We have made tremendous progress in better understanding each other's priorities at the last summit that we had in July 2023. And now it's time really to build on the momentum, deepen our presence on the ground, and strengthen our bonds. Madam Chair, the final chapter that I would like to reiterate is the need for a reinforcement of multilateralism. We are facing a paradox of an increasingly multipolar world while multilateralism is under pressure, and we need to continue to effectively deliver. We are aware of what our partners, especially from that global majority, perceive as a lack of delivery on our side, despite the fact that our track record on aid, on climate finance, on debt relief, and so on, is better than most, better than what it gets credit for. We must build up a positive, credible, and evidence-based narrative. The Global Gateway has become a central element of our strategy to reach out to the global majority. 2 years after the launch of this major initiative, we have mobilized 66 million in investments. And the Global Gateway is EU's main proposal in the global battle of narratives and the battle of offers. The need for a UN that is fit for today and for the future gathered widespread consensus also at the G20 Ministerial in Rio. The need to reform the United Nations Security Council to better represent all regions of the world, notably Africa and Latin America and the Caribbean, gathered large consensus. And the fact that the EU has been a strong advocate for the African Union seat at the G20 is a first important significant step. Overall, there is a clear sense of urgency about the need to reinvigorate multilateralism, but we need consensus on how to address gaps in global governance. The next months will be important to advance the reform process of the multilateral system, in particular ahead of the Summit of the Future in September 2024. Madam Chair, I come to a closing. Allow me to thank you for your long-standing support to EU's common foreign security and defense policy. And in these challenging times, we must remain united and firm along our like-minded partners. We count on you, honourable members of the European Parliament and of national parliaments, to join forces and to harness the full potential of parliamentarian diplomacy, which remains a very powerful vehicle to reach out to the world and help build sustainable, future-proof partnerships. 2024 is the year where countries with more than half the world's population, over 4 billion people, will send their people to the polls. We know not all elections will be free and fair. I know that the European Parliament elections will be free and fair, and I wish you every success in all of your endeavors. Back to you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, Ambassador Prong, for this intervention that gives us a clear view of the current and future priorities of EU's common foreign and security policy and common security and defense policy. So we now move on to the debate. As usual, you are each given 90 seconds so everyone can speak. And the first speaker is Zoltan Nemeth.
Thank you very much, Juliana. I would like to express my gratitude to Madame Prong. I would like to inform you, Ambassador, that Hungary is one of the incoming presidencies soon. And my question relates the qualified majority question. In the final declaration, there is a statement that we would support the qualified majority in the CFSP, CSDP field. We know that this is the position of the two individuals and the two institutions who have signed this, namely Belgium and the European Parliament Foreign Relations Committee. But I would like to make it clear here that we are against the qualified majority in the field of CFSP. This is not our position. We think that it is against the fundamental principles of the European Union, equality of the member states. It is against the principle of the said multilateralism. If we are multilateral internationally, we should remain multilateral in the European Union as well. And it is, again, against the unity, because I don't think it is a strong unity if there are some big nations who vote against the small nations. It is an integral part of the sovereignty of our national identity and the effectiveness of the European Union, as it is actually in the case of NATO. So I believe that we should join with Federica Mogherini, who yesterday sided against the idea of the qualified majority. And I hope that in this room we have got a relatively strong majority behind this position. Right. Thank you very much.
Okay. much. And, oh, right. Thank you very much, and please stick to the time. So, Mr. Javier Nart from European Parliament.
Gracias. Absolutamente.
Thank you very much. I'm completely outraged by the lack of thinking and lack of criteria when it comes to studying what we're doing. I've heard that we've carried out so many missions abroad, and I'm going to talk about Africa. Well, what kind of a glorious success have we had in the Sahel region? We've gone from disaster to disaster, and all we have left is Mauritania and a country which is controlled by a heinous tribe, which is Chad. And the European Union is just looking us away, because all we can do is to look at the repressive government of the Chad government that hands the power from generation to generation. We've deployed a very important mission in Mali, the UTM Mali, but it has been a full disaster because we haven't been able to train a single operational battle group. If you go to Koulikoro and you speak to the officials, to the officers and to the soldiers, then you realize that what the colonel is saying is actually not true. And therefore, nothing is actually working, because a war in the desert, which involves a lot of mobility, what we do is we train indoors without weapons or ammunition. And I can't help but wonder, why have we sent so many Mali soldiers to death, and why is Wagner there now? We haven't learned the lessons from there. And I was expecting some real insight into what we have done in the framework of UCAP and UTM Mali. But no, we have just listened to a very friendly description about our presence there and how we spent a lot of money there. But we're not there. Wagner is there. And it's our fault, because we haven't been able to provide the required answers. It's a full scandal. We haven't really analyzed what we have done or the money that we have spent.
Teresa Scavenius, please stick to the minute because we have to finish on time. Thank you. Madam Teresa Scavenius.
I think it's really important that we know that Europe is facing a balance between supporting and defending our borders versus defending the whole international rule of law system. And therefore I strongly support in the text that we understand that European security policy is based on rule-based international order. It creates the foundation for navigation, economy, trade, human rights, everything. So if we go too deeply into the national borders discussion and we defend our borders instead of focusing on the post-national peaceful collaboration. And that's also why it's really important to mention again that we should not confiscate or use the confiscated Russian money, because that is not to stick to the rule of law. We should be aware that the way we secure European politics is via food and water security. It's global trade. It's about peaceful collaboration. And therefore we should understand the causes of how we create this community and this society. And I see a trend today that we speak the language of war and borders instead of speaking the language of post-nationalism and security via human rights and rule of law.
Okay, now Thibault François. Monsieur Thibault François.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dear colleagues, this notion of common defence takes us to the another step of towards a federalism that is not within the scope of the EU. We do not want to share the ownership of our nuclear deterring power. We don't want to isolate the concept of EU autonomy as defended by Mr. Macron. It is not acceptable to put our armed forces under a command that is not French. And not through a majority voting. Your priorities actually aim at putting an end to independent and national defence policies, erasing nations. for a stronger EU system. France ought to remain a powerful stakeholder. I entered into politics in 2023 when France was one of the few countries to oppose to the launch of the war in Iraq on the basis of a lie. That's the opposition taken by France at the UN. We support initiatives of good common sense and cooperation at the EU level, but never will we accept that our armed forces should be placed under the single command of an EU staff.
From Ireland.
Madam Chairman, thank you very much. I should preface everything I say by saying I'm an independent member of the Senate in the Irish Parliament, and as such my opinions are basically my own, not the opinions of the Irish government. In 2022 there were 493 million plus ransomware attacks in the world, 2022. We talk about militarization here today when in fact we're at war every day. There are no borders in the battles we're fighting because the battle we're fighting is in cyberspace. There is a complete lack of commitment to serious cyber awareness in both the IT and OT sector. With respect to the militarization of Europe, I'm rather concerned that we're talking about military boots on the ground systems in Europe. This has never been discussed properly within parliaments. The Irish people are neutral and have been neutral since the foundation of the state. I have some reservations about that myself, but that's neither here nor there. Our people are neutral. You cannot have a European army without having a European intelligence network. We do not have an intelligence network, therefore we need to stop talking about the militarization of Europe. We talk about support for Ukraine, yet yesterday we heard starvation for weapons, starvation for ammunition. What sort of support for Ukraine is that? That's not support for Ukraine. I am concerned that senior people in Europe are making statements that have not been properly debated across the European Union, and we are running ourselves to a situation where we will become something like the United Nations Security Council, which is totally dysfunctional and has no real role in the world anymore. So I would ask that we take a step back, think about where we're going, and let's have a discussion internationally. Let's come up with agreement. The last speaker from France, he made it perfectly clear. The French do not want French boots on the ground anywhere under the command of anybody other than French people. So let's take a step back and let's not rush forward into something we may not be able to back ourselves out of. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman.
Right. Okay. Dear colleagues, I'm unable to cut you, so you can speak as much as you want, but then I will not be able to pass the floor to your next colleagues, and then you will be really upset. So stop clapping and start respecting the timing. So Richard Kols from Lithuania.
Well, thank you. This is a very arrogant approach from you, Madam Chair. I would also suggest those who gave a speech, send us an email your speech. Do not read it out here, so we will save time for our debates here, crucial debates. Just coming to the point for the discussion. Yesterday we talked about the strategic compass, and I think today is the time to talk about, when it comes to CFSP, on a moral compass. Yesterday, Mogherini mentioned the elephant in the room. I think we need to call it out. We talk about the common foreign policy. While we have the members of the EU countries, officials, meeting autocrat leaders, when actually Navalny, you madam mentioned Navalny, on a day when he was put to the rest, internal rest to the ground, 2 foreign ministers from the EU shared the bread with Lavrov. When we have discussions on Iran supplying weapons to Ukraine that kill civilian population in Ukraine, we have EU member state officials greeting Iranian officials in Tehran. What is this? Really, what is this? This is clear spitting on our common foreign policy. And this should be called out. There should be zero tolerance to such activities. We have instrumentalization of migrants of our external borders. What happens? EU member state officials goes and participates security forum organized by self-proclaimed King Lukashenko. We have lost the moral compass. We talk about strategic compass. This should be a discussion today among ourselves and call out those who are actually saying that we are not in favor of qualified majority vote. Yes, because they're obstructing our common foreign policy. I mean, we ridiculate on the things right now. Somebody calling out that we need to, through the dialogue and peace. With whom? Everyone here in this room, we actually call for the special tribunal. In the meantime, we're okay that our officials meet those who we are about to trial. It's schizophrenic, for God's sake. Thank you.
As far as your personal remark, and since you are not shaking hands with me like Iranians since Madrid, and you have great supporters here, I would like to abstain from personal remarks in the future, please. I'm here to coordinate the timing. So we have next speaker, André Flaut.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. This debate is very much alive and kicking. Thank you. Thank you very much to organisers for staging this session. Let us not forget the organisers. In the present context, there is much anxiety and much importance is given to parliamentary diplomacy that ought to be based on dialogue, partnership and mutual respect and the search for peace. It is urgent that we should reinvigorate the power of multinational bodies, starting with the UN, and we ought to guarantee, and it's crucial, it's capital, that we remain a very firm defenders of respect for everybody and from everybody, including Russia, Israel, and African partners. We need to redefine the world equilibrium within the UN. We need to better involve Africa and the global South, I would say. And we ought to congratulate High Representative Borrell for what he does. He shares the same line of thought as Mrs. Mogherini and Mr. Solana, but we've got our work cut out when it comes to adopting qualified majority voting. I was minister in 2003 when Belgium also opposed sending armed forces to Iraq. If I had to do it again, I would oppose this again, whatever the mode of voting, qualified majority or not.
Sanchez from Portugal.
Thank you, Madam the Chair. These are the times since the Second World War that we have been called upon to clearly and urgently to strengthen the EU security and defence policy. We have gone from decades of a vigilant peace to a war within our European space and increase in risk. In the Middle East, we are witness an increase in risk and generalized conflict due to a military action to recover hostage that is annihilating the Palestinian people. The consequences of these two conflicts alone are impossible to predict for new generations. They will leave deep scars with serious consequences for Europe and humanity. Both the war in Ukraine and the dramatic situation in the Middle East reinforce the need to create the conditions to tackle conflicts and crises together, to protect the Union and its citizens, and to strengthen international peace and security. The European Union must continue to defend the preservation and primacy of international law in Ukraine and thus guarantees our own security in the future. But it must also do so clearly in Israel. We must be rigorous and consistent whenever human rights are in stake. In this context, it is absolutely necessary to depend on consensus and strict support, both financial and in terms of equipment, to sustain Ukraine's defense efforts. On the other hand, we must ensure that the conditions are in place both before the end of the war and before Ukraine joins EU to process of rebuilding and restoring Ukraine infrastructure to begin. But also, with regard to Israel, the European Union must be firm and consistent in condemning the systematic violations of the human rights of civilian populations. These are essential conditions for European peace and security, but we must not forget at all. At the same time, the Union must move from words to deeds. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you. And now we have Alexos Trifionides
Yes. Thank you,
from
Madam.
Cyprus.
While the war in Ukraine is ongoing, conflict and therefore instability and tension in the Middle East and the Mediterranean continue to rise. In order to address those conflicts and meet to goal becoming the global security provider and be effective in protecting citizens, promoting our common values and defending our interests, the Union needs to adequate security architecture, sufficient resources and capabilities. Significant progress and correlated results have been achieved in the field, including through the strategic compass. However, a common vision leading to united stance in key matters is still needed to enable and empower the Union to act in unity and rapidly to address the security threats it faces. Security and stability in the Middle East are linked to the Union's security and stability. The Middle East and the Mediterranean, and by extent the southern neighborhood of the EU, should therefore be high in the European agenda and list of priorities. The risk of a broader escalation in the region is real to must be addressed without delay. We call for EU to assume greater responsibility in the region. We call for EU to have more presence and visibility to the Mediterranean and the Middle East, including with a naval presence. Madam Ambassadors, how will the Union continue to preventing the escalation of the outgoing Israel-Hamas war into regional conflict in the Middle East, the consequences of which will be disadvantaging? Thank you.
Excellent. So the next speaker is Andrei Grisp. Sorry for pronouncing maybe wrong your name.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, in my opinion, the key challenges of the common foreign and security policy in 2024 will include continuing the European Union's involvement in response to Russian aggression against Ukraine. The main challenges will be the maintaining the EU's unity in supporting Ukraine, for all providing large-scale assistance to Ukraine, political, military, economic and humanitarian. In 2023, in the context of enlargement policy, a priority and the same time and challenge will be to maintain the unprecedentedly high dynamics of the accession process of Ukraine, Moldova and Georgia, and Western Balkan countries too. In the area of global policy, it will be crucial to maintain the European Union's strategic partnership with the United States. The priority will be to strengthen the European Union's role in creating an international environment and strengthening its security, including energy security, by tightening cooperation with existing partners and establishing privileged relations with additional countries. In 2024, we will also intensify preparations to the Polish presidency of the Council of the European Union in the first half of 2025, both in terms of programming and coordination, including the presidency with Troika, Poland, Denmark, and Cyprus in the area of external relations. Thank you so much.
Okay, so we have still 11 more speakers, and we have time left until 1:15 to wrap up the conversation. I don't know how we can do that, but some of the colleagues who are taking the planes asked me to finish it up earlier, so please, colleague, just take that into account, that we need also ambassador to answer the questions as well. We have now Sarah Nani.
Thank you very much. I think that it's clear for everyone here in the room that NATO will remain our pillar of defense here in Europe, no matter how much we are working on different structures and so on. This is what our defense is going to look like in a case of crisis. But the EU can focus on the industry, and that's what they're already doing, and I'm really looking forward to the proposal of the Commission that is coming out now for the arms industry strategy. Mrs. Pronk, I don't know why Mr. Borrell didn't mention why he isn't here today. We all know it is this strategy. And I think it's also not a good sign that he is not coming and that it's released on the very day that we are meeting here together. If you could please tell him. He hasn't been here since 2017, and I don't think this is really adequate. I would like to thank all those colleagues who were working and are still working on a common perspective in the European Union on security and defense and strong European policies also. And I hope that we can remain pragmatic over this issue. And one last sentence, those who are repeating Russian propaganda here, please can you tell me how much do you get paid for that?
Okay. So now we have GP Kopsa.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I promise to be brief. I was listening carefully all the remarks about wars, help, money. So I would like to remind you about one forgotten war that happened in September last year, and this was the war of Nagorno-Karabakh in Armenia, where Azerbaijan is occupying the eastern border belt of Armenian territory, has occupied Nagorno-Karabakh, what created the exodus of about 120,000 people in just 3 days. So my question is that if we speak about help to stranded people in different wars, if there is any chance to get some help for Armenians that were driven out of Nagorno-Karabakh just with their properties, they were able to load into their cars, and if there is any perspective, because this was the war where all the Western world was looking different direction. So I just want to remind you that there is a war, there is suffering of the people, and there are many people arrested by Azeri security forces that very little is known about their whereabouts. So if there is a chance to help these people get out of the jails and send them home once the war is over. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. And we have Gian Giacomo Calovini.
Sì, grazie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have to say that what we've heard a few minutes ago make us understand how we are very far from having a European defence. It's perhaps a dream, something we read about in the newspapers, but it's not really tangible yet. There's some interesting developments. I have to say that over the last few days, the European Parliament is voting on the Aspides operation in the Red Sea, an operation jointly carried out with France and under the coordination of Greece. This sends an interesting sign to a very difficult area, as we said previously. I also agree with those who said that the only army that Europe can rely on is the NATO army these days. I also think that when we talk about defense, we shouldn't only talk about the military, we should also talk about cooperation and diplomacy. Seeing as this morning session is dedicated to this, I'd like to ask a question on a continent that was too neglected, and I'm referring to Africa. We know that Nigeria, for instance, is a country that by 2050 will have 50 million inhabitants. I have to say that the European institutions are not talking about this country, and Africa has invested a great deal in diplomacy. I'd like to understand, therefore, what are the concrete proposals as far as this continent is concerned. Thank you.
Grazie, onorevole. And now we have Evangelos Apostolakis. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dear delegates, Greece stands in favor of a European strategic autonomy in security and defense towards a defense for Europe that protects. It is worth mentioning that the EU defense landscape has long been characterized by severe underinvestment and Pennernian fragmentation. European defense technology and industrial base has, of course, been influenced by this fragmentation. In the meantime, strategic competitions like Russia and China have increasing their defense budget by almost 300 and 600%, respectively, over the last decades, while the EU only by 20% collectively by the EU member states. Is the aim of the expected growth of the commitment annual defense budget of the EU member states to 290 billion by 2025 still feasible? Has there been any progress regarding the set target? The 23 EU member states that are also NATO members have long been guided by the 2% of gross domestic product defense spending commitment under NATO, formalized at the 2014 Wild Summit. As already mentioned, current geopolitical developments in the Middle East and the Eastern Mediterranean cannot be tackled only under the auspices of NATO. Greece supports the European strategic autonomy in security and defense through PESCO, thus strengthening the Europe pillar of the Atlantic Alliance without competing it. Thank you.
Right, and we have Deville Shakaliene.
Thank you. So one of the problems is that we are still playing by the two sets of different rules. As I already said yesterday, we still need to understand that peacetime rules are over for us, and we need to see the whole picture. And actually, ability to connect the dots is probably crucial to our ability to deter our adversaries. So what my colleagues before me said, we really need to connect the dots between the evil axis of Russia and China and also Iran and North Korea and get ready for the next challenges. Actually, if Congressional Commission on the Strategic Posture of the United States unanimously concluded that in 2027, 2035, the United States, together with allies, must be ready to deter and defeat both Russia and China simultaneously, then we actually have two tasks. Defense spending, minimum 2% for each and every one of us, and defense industry revival, losing the constraints of bureaucracy. That's it.
We have Mark Demesmaeker, please.
Yes, thank you. I feel that I should respond to the intervention of the delegate from Denmark, who I'm sure doesn't speak for the majority in the Danish parliament, who says that she's concerned about the principles of international law, but again speaks against using the frozen Russian assets. Let me remind her that the Russian Federation has been violating these rules for decades, that it has invaded the internationally recognized territory of Ukraine, and it has done so since 2014. Even yesterday, the former President Medvedev reiterated that for him Ukraine is not Ukraine, but that Ukraine is Russia. So if she wants, I'll take her, myself, to the destroyed cities and villages so that she can grasp the magnitude of what Russia has been doing in Ukraine. It is responsible for turning cities, entire cities, into rubble. So it is legitimate, in my eyes, to take countermeasures, given its violation of the most fundamental norms of international law, in the form of transferring Russian state assets as compensation for damage caused directly as a result of Russia's illegal war. It is the morally right thing to do, it is legitimate, and moreover, there is a strong legal case to make, as an international team of legal experts already have stated. Thank you.
Right, and we have Hulusi Akar from Turkey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have been witnessing the last of the changes in all over the world in this current global and the regional security environment, particularly the war in Ukraine and the Israelis' offensive against Palestinian people. It is crucial to reformulate our defense, security, and the foreign policies and work for de-escalation, mediation, and cooperation. Acknowledging the importance of an integrated approach to security and stability, Turkey seeks to work with the EU in its efforts, especially to combat terrorism and to fight against illegal immigration. As you know, Turkey's efforts against terrorism and illegal immigration make an important contribution to Europe's security. Please remember, Turkey is the last barrier between terrorism and Europe. Yet, unfortunately, Turkey's fight against terrorism is not supported by some EU members and by some allied countries. In this regard, I would like to underline that support for the PKK, YPG, PYD, and the FETÖ organizations is unacceptable and counterproductive. These terrorist organizations are really a threat to Europe as well. The close cooperation and the further inclusiveness are the answer to the security-related problems. However, the EU policy becoming more restrictive and the protectionist also becoming against the EU interests. Final note, I would like to remind you, Armenia occupied 20% of the Azerbaijan territories for 30 years, killed 20,000 people, as Azerbaijan just retook and liberated their own territories. Thank you.
Right, we have Ivana Klimpush-Tinsate.
Yes, thank you. Perfect. I would like to join Mark Demesmaeker from Ukraine, inviting our Danish colleagues to visit Ukraine. I'll be happy to be your guide as well. We in Ukraine do not only believe in common values, but we stood up to defend them in front of the unprovoked, and I underline unprovoked, attack of the Russian Federation, and calling on negotiations with someone that is a war criminal and expecting that with them we can reach anything close to respect of the international law or the principles. I think it's about naivete that is still present here in the European Union. Moreover, I think we have to be very honest with ourselves, and seeing how some of the EU states are developing relationship with Iran, with Russian Federation, while the common security and common defense and foreign policy of the EU is stating otherwise. I think it is about undermining your own efficiency and your own geostrategic capacity and real security of the Union. So it's about addressing those issues inside of the Union and not waiting till the colleagues will go on to develop relationships with North Korea. And last but not least, we are grateful for those tectonic changes that have been happening in the European Union and for all the support that we have received. So my question is to Ambassador Pronk, High Commissioner Borrell has been suggesting to reinvigorate the European Peace Facility. What are the prospects of that? Thank you.
Right, thank you. And from Georgia, we have Maika Bochorishvili.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Georgia's partnership with the European Union is based on a solid foundation, and this foundation, to some extent, is created by the cooperation in the field of foreign and security policy. Georgia is beneficiary of the EU's policy. Since 2008, the EU monitoring mission has been operating in Georgia, and we are grateful to EU member states for their contributions to the work to this mission. This is another proof that the EU is interested in contributing to maintaining peace and stability in Georgia. However, we must also mention here that the EU mission does not have access to the occupied regions of Georgia as stipulated by the mandate of the mission. Of course, the reason for this is Russia's aggressive policy, and it is vital for us not to let this policy to succeed. That's why support for non-recognition policy of Georgia's occupied regions is significant. Georgia is committed to continue its positive dynamic to alignment with the EU's common foreign policy, despite obvious risks of our territorial integrity and sovereignty. However, this is not the only thing that determines our attitudes towards EU's foreign policy. Georgia has proactively engaged in ensuring that the territory of Georgia is not used for circumvent EU sanctions on Russia, including financial sector sanctions. Georgia has made a significant contribution to work of EU missions in Central Africa and Mali, and there are opportunities to strengthen our cooperation in this direction, and we are ready to work together with the European Union. Thank you.
Right, thank you. And from Portugal, we have Firmino Marques.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. La croissance et la...
Thank you, Madam Chair. Growth and riches of Europe are linked to the way it will utilize data, connecting technologies, and AI. This will make a difference in our life for better or worse. Nowadays, in the EU, whatever anyone's political position, we see a threat to Western values. There is a triangle: Russia, Iran, and North Korea, which is a result of abusive use of AI. Also about managing migration and border controls. This is really preoccupying. We have reinforced trust on AI, and now the Commission proposed new rules so that AI system be transparent, ethical, and impartial. But I am sure that the risk that is mentioned in this chapter deserves particular attention when it comes to security and protection of values that go hand in hand with democracy and the Western world. It is a real preoccupation.
Thank you very much. And we have Charles Flanagan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I share the frustration and disappointment of many delegates at the failure of the High Representative to be with us? In fact, it's not the first time that he has failed to attend the parliamentary tier, and I think that's most regrettable. It's regrettable in the context of Europe becoming more serious about its own security. And I say that speaking on behalf of a small state, Ireland, acknowledging the fact that we must do much more to play our part with our European colleagues. We have a challenge in the European Union to maintain unity, and I don't see the leadership evident in order to ensure that unity is maintained in a way that's expected. We see the transatlantic alliance, as we know, is dependent upon the USA. But where stands the USA? The fact is that Europe lacks a strong defence capacity. And the vulnerability of the European Union is evident in the contribution and the frustration, as we saw in the contribution of my colleague from Latvia, Richard Coles. We live in a very dangerous world at a very dangerous time. We see Russia is more threatening. We see America is more uncertain. We see the European Union more unprepared. And we are at the most dangerous juncture in over 20 years, in decades or more. And I don't feel the urgency in this room. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. And finally, we have Pavel Fischer.
Madam Chair, thank you so much. I have to struggle to understand why Josep Borrell is not here. What is the sense of accountability here? Why we have this institution? Could we double-check his job description? Because is he willing still to do the job? I have some difficulties to understand this. If there is a mistake in his staff, and he has a very good, well-paid staff, which is unable to put it in his calendar then he has to fire them. This is as simple as that. And if it is once that he is absent here, we can completely, with the whole respect to his agenda, accept this. But if it is twice, 3 times, each time since 2017, if it is true, I have no idea, but I struggle to understand why is not the High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy here. We are not here to meet on the beach. We are here to speak about war and about peace. How can we work in synergy if the actor number 1 of the European Commission is simply missing? This is nonsense. This is maybe arrogance, or this is maybe ignorance. So I personally have to say, with sadness, that I look forward for the new Commission. Thank you.
Right. On this final note, I will pass the floor to Ambassador Pronk to answer all these questions, and I will leave to the Belgian presidency as well to conclude the speech. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I took extremely careful note of the 22 speakers who intervened and made their remarks and questions, and for sure your messages will be passed. I will see how I can address in 6 different lines on regrouping some of the questions and remarks I got. And I would like to start out by thanking the representatives of Ukraine here present. I would like to reassure you that EU's unwavering support to Ukraine is relentless. You asked a question on the European Peace Facility and also the future of the Ukraine Assistance Fund. That is currently being debated in Council, and the leaders and heads of state reiterated their firm commitment also on the 1st of February and urged the Council to make swift progress also through the European Peace Facility. And let me add on that note, I mentioned the number of 28 million EU and member states together. The sense of urgency is great, and I would like to reiterate also through your democratic institutions that we need to do more and we need to do it faster. The second element I would like to answer, Madam Chair, is the immediate neighborhood, restating again the firm commitment of the EU of the normalization process between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and also our civilian mission. Yuma was mentioned, the CSDP mission that we have on the ground in Armenia that we had also established with a record speed of time, considering the fact that we still decide on these things by unanimity with the 27 member states in my committee. And I will be hopefully also able to witness on the ground in April to see the results of that commitment. Again, in our immediate neighborhood, the question around the East Med, around the Mediterranean, as well as the Middle East peace process. I made in the introductory remarks that I can also assure all colleagues, maybe it sounded like I read them out, but it was really a message from the High Representative on a firm political commitment on all the elements that I mentioned. Our Operation Irini, I would like to mention that a military operation upholding, the only one upholding the weapons arms embargo against Libya, the firm commitment to the Cyprus issue, and also to keep that very, very high on our agenda. The third remark I would like to make, Madam Chair, is, or the fourth rather, is again going to our immediate neighborhood, the African continent. And we all know Africa is not a country. With my committee, I conducted a very intense working visit last week to South Africa, Mozambique and Ethiopia. It was the third time that I engaged also with the African Union on Ethiopian soil in difficult conversations, because many of the priorities that we see, they perceive that differently. And that is why I also carefully mentioned that is the global majority that we need to continue to talk with, to discuss with, to listen to. I would like to say to some of you who might be a bit more critical towards some of the missions and operations also in the Sahel region, we cannot be wanting to be more present than the receiving states want us to be present. I would like to mention 2 success stories on the African continent, and I can name many more. One of them is a training mission in Mozambique, where we helped the Mozambican armed forces fight terrorism in Cabo Delgado. The other one is EUTM Somalia, UCAP Somalia, where we also help a democratic government, or government that is working towards even more democracy, to fight terrorism by Al-Shabaab. I would like to mention Operation Atalanta, that is successful in fighting piracy. And honorable ladies and gentlemen, I think we have good stories to tell, good stories to sell, and good results to share. And I also count on you. Even in difficult circumstances, we conduct our military missions operations civilian CSDP engagement on the basis of strategic review, and where we fail to meet our mandate, rest assured, no one is more self-critical than the EU member states themselves, asking themselves the question, how can we continue to engage? And if we stay, how should we stay, under which circumstances? The 5th remark, and then I almost come to a closure, Madam Chair, is the broader sense of the hybridity of the threats that we're facing. And I'm happy that many of you mentioned that also in terms of the ransomware attacks, the cyber war that we're facing every day. I cannot agree more. That we need to continue to first and foremost raise awareness by sharing intelligence. Our SIAC unit is ready also to contribute to that raised awareness, and we have a cyber diplomacy toolbox that we use with attribution, with awareness, and with critical diplomatic engagement. The final word is on, and I know I'm not doing all of the interventions, but also the richness of the debate that is surrounding the CFSP and CSDP justice, is the how we decide. I chair a committee, your honorable ladies and gentlemen, of 27 sovereign member states who decide by unanimity, that is firmly rooted in the EU treaty. And the EU treaty is very clear on what we can and cannot do under QMV. If it's up to the member states to decide so otherwise, I stand at your disposal. Back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ambassador Pronk, for your valuable contribution and different elements you gave also as an answer to the interventions of the different colleagues. And also, colleagues, thank you for the vivid debate and also exchange on foreign and security policy, which shows once again the importance of inter-parliamentary exchange on a national level also. A lot of challenges ahead, which needs also political leadership of all of us. Instead of polarization, we need unity, because polarization reinforces authoritarian leaders and the different elephants in the room we don't like. So let us cherish the European spirit in our daily work in national parliaments. Very important, as I said also in the beginning, we need to be not only firefighters, but also architects of Europe. Let's go ahead. And I give now the floor also again to make some conclusions in the final sessions on the priority of Ukraine for the European presidency of Belgium, but also the steps to make in enlargement. About the European defense industry also we made a good debate, and about also humanitarian tragedy which continues still in Gaza and Israel. Thank you very much everyone for this fruitful participation in this debate. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Het was ineens een heel ander gezicht op mijn linkerhand, dank je wel.
Ja, ik moest ineens invallen, want
ja, zij moest een vliegtuig.
Deze moet naar Boekarest.
Goedemorgen. Dank u wel, meneer de Besmaker, dank u wel voor uw fantastische, uit het hart gegrepen.
Altijd, ja. Okay, dear colleagues, as we reach the end of our activities in our conference, it's time to draw our conclusions, as Els has said. Rest assured, this will be a brief overview. First of all, I believe it's fair to say that we had a successful and a productive Inter-Parliamentary CFSP and CSDP conference, set against the historical backdrop of Brugge, which also offered the opportunity to further expand and deepen our network, our personal networks. I would like to take this moment, first of all, to thank all of our staff from both the Chamber of Representatives and the Senate, who worked very hard behind the scenes to make this conference possible and ensure, and I know that you will agree with me, the excellent organization. Please join me in a round of applause for all the contributions. Well done. We had very interesting sessions with inspiring speakers and lively debates that provided plenty of food for thought. We met the elephants in the room and others. The debate on supporting Ukraine against Russian aggression demonstrated a united will to continue supporting Ukraine. This support aims to fend off Russian aggression and to provide Ukraine with the means and the capacities necessary to liberate its territory and to free its people during this particularly difficult and challenging phase of the war. In the session on the ongoing process of enlargement, we learned that enlargement, or should we say reintegration, is fully back on the agenda. There's a new dynamic and energy. We heard interesting perspectives on the necessary reforms of the Union and whether these reforms need to be synchronized with the expansion to include one or more new member states. From the session on the strategic compass and EU resilience, the main takeaway was that there's still significant potential for further cooperation and more cooperation within the EU. What we need is political will. Our urgent debate on the situation in the Middle East revealed a unanimous condemnation of the terror attack by Hamas against Israel and deep concern over the extent of human suffering in the Gaza Strip. And, of course, we had our lively debate this morning, fresh in our memory, on the priorities on the CFSP, CSDP with Ambassador Pronk, and make sure we did everything to get Mr. Borrell here on this session, but unfortunately he couldn't. But after all, it was a very lively, very good debate, I think. Dear colleagues, the three co-chairs of the Troika have approved a joint statement, and you will find it on the IPEX platform. I believe you have also got this sheet, the IPEX platform. Your staff can download it there and send it to you, click it to you. To be brief, if I can summarize the joint statement, there are four main items. On top, we have put the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine. Then there is the worrying and volatile situation in the Middle East, chapter on enlargement, and one of the strategic compass on and EU resilience. The Russian war of aggression against Ukraine. Of course, we reiterate our condemnation of the aggression, stress the need to prosecute the crimes of the Russian leadership, express our support for the peace formula presented by Ukraine, and we welcome the proposals of the High Representative for medium to long-term security guarantees for Ukraine and a complementary financial mechanism for Ukraine under the European Peace Facility. And we call on member states, all member states, to urgently deliver on the capabilities that Ukraine needs in this stage of the war. The worrying and volatile situation in the Middle East, we emphasize the urgency of breaking the cycle of violence and relaunching the peace protests. But, for instance, we also condemn the Houthi attacks and we condemn in general the spike in anti-Semitism, anti-Muslim hatred and racism across Europe. On enlargement, reaffirmed the commitment to an enhanced merit-based accession process. We stress that alignment with the CFSP is an essential indicator of adherence to the EU's fundamental principles and sustainable future membership. We note the strategic importance on the Western Balkans. And last but not least, there's the strategic compass and EU resilience, where we stress the necessary support again needed by Ukraine. And we recall the EU's objective is to best prepare for fast emerging challenges and substantially enhance its resilience. And we welcome the third joint declaration on EU-NATO cooperation. That in brief, but you can read the joint statement in full by using the IPEX platform, as I told you. In conclusion, dear colleagues, I wish you all a safe journey back home, or enjoy your extended stay if possible in Brugge, in Bruges, as soon as it stops drizzling, but I've been told that it will as soon as we stop or finish our lunch. It's always worthwhile to linger a little longer on the cobbled streets of Brugge. And let's meet again in Hungary next time for the next conference. And can I invite Mr. Nemeth, the Hungarian delegation chair, to briefly tell us when and where and how, please. No. Yes, it should work now.
It's great. Okay. Dear colleagues, I would like to thank to the Belgian colleagues this fantastic 2.5 days. To all three of you else, Mark and Peter, it's impressive how you have been able to represent the Belgian position, and I was grateful to enjoy your kind hospitality. The Hungarian, Spanish, Belgian trio is going to be finished with the Hungarian presidency starting on the 1st of July. We have a very smooth cooperation in the trio on all levels, I have to tell you. We have put together a joint program, a joint presidency program, and we follow that line, and it seems to work very well. You have been an honest broker, and that is the intention of the Hungarian presidency as well, to be an honest broker if we are confronting a very delicate period, as we will have the European elections. And the institutional phase is going to be terminated, the 5 years finishes, and the new 5 years strategic period starts for the European Union. We can see that there are a lot of different opinions in the room. We could feel sometimes the tension. I would like to welcome this. I think that the situation requires thinking, and the divergent views which was reflected here, I think is more divergent than the views of governments in general, but we are not diplomats, but we are politicians, and we are representing our people, and I think that's why the emotional added component is needed in our parliamentary work. The only thing I would like to ask from the colleagues is respect towards each other, and to try to escape from unjustified accusations and to maintain the appropriate level of respect towards each other, especially towards ladies. I would like to ask if that is possible. Dear colleagues, everybody is invited to Hungary. We will have the 25th Inter-Parliamentary meeting, the IPC, on the 9th and the 10th of September. Put into your calendar. We will have the meeting in Budapest, in the Hungarian National Assembly. Some say that that is one of the nicest national assemblies in the world. You are most welcome to enjoy that, and I will make sure you will have a proper guided tour in the Hungarian National Assembly, and we will try to make a program which is as interesting as this was. Thank you once more very much to our Belgian colleagues, and see you in Budapest, 9th and 10th of September. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's noted. All I have to say is that I will invite you now to the lunch or the brunch or whatever on the 4th floor. Thank you.